that the church has been relocated to Lebanon. From 1915 onwards, Turkey adopted a series of laws relating to so-called abandoned properties. And of course, abandoned properties was a euphemism which was used to confiscate the properties of the millions of Armenians that once were inhabitants of Ottoman Turkey. Under the 1923 Treaty of Lausanne, the Republic of Turkey undertook, under international law, to respect the rights of what was called in the treaty non-Muslim minorities. The provisions of the Treaty of Lausanne provided that non-Muslim minorities, which in effect means Christian minorities for the most part, were to be accorded equal rights, including the rights to property, including the rights to religious worship, and that these rights would be enshrined in the fundamental law of Turkey, meaning to say that any Turkish law or regulation that was contrary to giving effect to these rights would be invalid under international law. The reality was that the laws on abandoned properties were designed to deny the Armenians the right to reclaim their properties. In addition, given the tremendous religious significance of this property, the denial of the property rights in this relation also implicates the right of Turkey's Christian minority, in this particular the still extant minority, which still remains in much smaller numbers, of course, in Turkey, to freely worship and to enjoy their historical, cultural, and religious patrimony in a land which they inhabited for well over 1,000 years. The case that has been initiated this Monday before the Turkish Constitutional Court is only the first step in achieving justice, in achieving the return of this property. It is a unique opportunity for Turkey to begin to reckon with the crimes of the past, to open a new chapter for Turkish-Armenian reconciliation. It is our sincere hope that this case will succeed before the Turkish Constitutional Court, failing which the Catholicosset has expressed its intention to appeal any adverse judgment to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And of course, there are many cases before the European Court which have recognized property rights and rights in particular to religious property in these contexts. I will end these introductory remarks by simply saying that while Turkey has made quite a bit of controversy over whether the events of 1915 constituted genocide or not, the essential facts are not in dispute. That in 1915, mass murder and mass deportations resulted in the virtual disappearance of the Armenian nation from Turkey. And recently, President Erdogan expressed his regret at these past events and perhaps offered a small measure of contrition. And this case, therefore, is a unique opportunity for President Erdogan, for the government of Turkey, to demonstrate its real and genuine commitment in expressing regret at these past wrongs by returning the property of the Holy See of Cilicia in Kozan. I will now introduce my respected colleagues that will be participating in today's press conference. I will begin with His Eminence Archbishop Choloyan, sitting to my right, the prelate of the Armenian Apostolic Church of America, Eastern United States. Your Eminence.
Thank you. First of all, I want to welcome all of you here for this press conference. As Mr. Bayan said, I am Archbishop Oshagan, the Archbishop of the Armenian Apostolic Church of America. My headquarters is in New York, and I have the jurisdiction over almost half of the United States. In fact, I am a member of the Silesian Brotherhood, and I'm a member of the Catholicosate as an administrative bishop, and now I'm representing His Holiness Catholicos Aram I. The reason we are here because on Monday, His Holiness filed a lawsuit with Turkey asking the return of our site in Sis, Catholicosal site in Sis. Going back to the Armenian church history, when the Seljuk and then Mongol invasion and destruction started in Armenia around 1100, so the See, Armenian church See, Holy See, started coming to West, and finally it was instituted in first Romgala in 1147, and then when the kingdom's capital became Sis, it was installed in Sis in 1293. Since then, our See, Holy See, was there until the genocide of 1915, when also the whole clergy forcibly were deported to the Arabian countries like Syria, and then eventually in Lebanon we have our headquarters. We have to know that during this whole time, Silesia and Silesian Catholicosate was living a flourished time. From this very important holy site, we had thousands of theologians, historians, people who helped us in order to open our view and work with the Western world. This is why Silesia became very, very flourished area. Since then, unfortunately, now we are living in Lebanon, and we are asking our land in order to go and to worship our religion there as we did for 1,000 years. I know that the land is ours. I know that the land recognizes her master. So this is why we are here, and I hope that this press conference will recognize widely our expectation, and eventually will work on the return of our holy site. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I would next like to introduce to my immediate left Dr. Teni Simonian, the ecumenical representative of the Catholicosate of Cilicia in Switzerland, and the coordinator of the legal team. Dr. Simonian.
Thank you very much. I would like to continue from where Archbishop Choloyan left, saying that as a church institution, or as Armenians, our religion has been, our faith has been a very important element in our life. Now, we didn't go into the history, but we know that we have a long history of upheavals, moving around, and in all these instances, it has been the church that has been the central point where we have collected and remained. And the church, of course, religion in any, in social sciences, we know that religion is an identity marker. And in that sense, it has been an important identity marker for us whenever we haven't had our land. And secondly, religion and our church has been the source of our spiritual and moral values. More thirdly, whenever we had no homeland, it has been also taken the national leadership of organizing our communities wherever we are. So, having commemorated the 50th anniversary, the 70th anniversary, coming to the 100th anniversary, it was a question for His Holiness Aram I. What happens now? We are settled, we have an organized diaspora. what do we give to our new generation? Our younger generation is grown with the memory of what His Eminence described. In 2012, he invited a group of international lawyers, jurists, and organized a conference in Antilles in order to discuss with them what could be done different in order to convey to the younger generation something more than the memory. The conference was held with the title, The Armenian Genocide from Recognition to Reparation. And the result of that conference is the following publication. Some of you may know, it's the published International Criminal Law Review, the special edition. So, following the conference's conclusions, His Holiness invited a team of lawyers, and we have here the key representatives of our team, and started reflecting how we can recuperate the holy center where our ancestors prayed for so many centuries as a place where our younger people now can go. The memory becomes a reality. The prayer language becomes not only a prayer hoping, but a prayer in the center that belongs to us. And therefore, this is why the case was lodged, and we hope that our prayers to go and pray in our home again, in our center, will have come true.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simonian. Next to the extreme left, not politically, but just where he's sitting at the table, is my dear colleague, Mr. Cem Sefoglu, who is the lawyer and legal counsel of the Catholicosate before the Turkish Constitutional Court. It was Mr. Sefoglu that filed the case this Monday before the court. Please.
Thank you. Yeah. My name is Cemurat Sofuoğlu, and I'm the lawyer of His Holiness Aram II, who is the Catholicos of the Armenian Catholicosate of Cilicia in Antalya in Beirut. The case I filed on Monday, I believe, will be the first property case in Turkey that has been filed of this nature. The returning of religious properties to their original owners. Finally, I would like to say that this case has no relations to the allegations of the genocide in 1915 or Armenian deportation. This is purely a property case. I would like to underline this fact. I did not discuss the genocide or the deportation in this case. We are claiming back the property existing in Kozan, in Sis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sofoglu. And last but not least, I would turn the floor to Mr. Aram Hamparyan, the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee. Please.
Thank you so much. We warmly welcome this case amid growing attention here in Washington about the rights of Christian minorities and growing concern for the return of religious properties to Christians and other minorities. The Congress has paid a lot of attention to this issue in the recent past. In 2011 and 2014, the full House and the House Foreign Affairs Committee have adopted passed legislation specifically calling upon Turkey to return churches, encouraging the U.S. government to encourage Turkey to do the same. And the measure that was adopted in committee last year but has yet to pass the full House would actually call upon the State Department to report annually about the status of returned churches by Turkey to religious minorities. We saw the Congress enact legislation establishing a special envoy for religious minorities in the Near East, which we thought was a a very positive step. We have seen the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom address the issue of returning churches to their rightful owners. We were very pleased that His Holiness Adam I was able to participate in a meeting of religious leaders last September with President Obama, during which they addressed these issues. Secretary Clinton and now Secretary Kerry have specifically raised this issue. Secretary Clinton, before leaving office, wrote us a letter saying how much of a priority it was to encourage Turkey to return religious property. So this issue is gaining traction here in the U.S. There's growing support for it. I think that some of the horrific events we read about in the newspapers and see on TV, I think certainly drives that interest. Turning to this specific case, this case holds great meaning for us on many levels. As Americans who believe in freedom of faith, as Armenians who hold our church in the highest regard. Bottom line, Armenian churches belong to the Armenian Church. Armenians should have the right, the unfettered right, to pray in those churches. We have the right to baptize our children there, to get married there, to offer last rites to those who die. This is a fundamental right. It's a human right. It's a religious right. This case is very significant. It is, of course, on its merits about one church, and we respect that. But there's also a broader meaning to it. We hope that it will represent a first step toward the legal return of the Armenian Church and the Armenian faithful to their homeland. We see it as a defense of religious freedom, as I noted. We see it as an opportunity, as Payam said, for the government of Turkey to give meaning to their words. This is a chance to step back from the policy of denial and to start making amends, to start reckoning honestly with the crimes of the past. It would also, I think, speak very highly of Turkey's respect for the rule of law, to surrender properties that are so obviously that were so obviously illegally taken. I think it would, in the final analysis, represent a major milestone for the Armenian nation on our journey to justice. We support the case. We think it's a very strong case on the merits, and we're confident that it will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. By way of summary, the case that has been submitted before the Turkish Constitutional Court is a human rights case. It is not a political matter. It is a very concrete demand for the return of property based on the rights of the Catholicosate, which were never extinguished, the legal personality which was never extinguished under Turkish law. And it is above all also about the right of religious worship. And just before opening the floor, I want to say, as someone who is not Armenian but who stands in solidarity with the struggle of the Armenians for justice, that this is a remarkable story of hope. It is a remarkable story of the resilience of the human spirit, that 100 years after these abominable acts, that there is still the hope to return. And I would hope once again to emphasize that the Turkish government sees this as an opportunity for reconciliation and returns these properties. But His Holiness Aram I has made it very clear that we are determined to go all the way to the European Court of Human Rights in order to win this case. With that, I will now open the floor to questions from the press. I would ask if you could please identify yourself when asking a question, please.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Oh, my name is Haik, and I'm Petian with Armenian TV. First question is, how big is the property? We saw the picture, but is it just one church or there are adjacent buildings? And what is it now? Is it being utilized as something else? And also, there is an Armenian church in Istanbul. I was wondering if any feedback from Armenian Patriarchate exists. Thank you.
Perhaps Mr. Sofoglu, who has visited the site, can speak a bit.
To be honest, I don't know. We don't know how big, because we couldn't access to the registration records. But we can see, as far as I can see, because I took the pictures. I've been twice in this region. it's quite big, as far as I can see, but I have no idea, to be honest.
If I may add to what Mr. Safoglu has said, one interesting feature of this case is that this gentleman was denied the right to even view the property records in the Land Registry Office of Kozan.
Yeah, because of the circulars, two circulars enacted, published by the Turkish governments in the past, one in 1983 and the last 2001. We are unable to access to the registration records for the Armenian properties.
So there's a circular specifically denying the right of Armenian claimants access to these property records.
My application has been rejected by the land registration and the entitled office in Kozan, and I attached this rejection to my submission.
Okay, one thing I can tell that when we say church or monastery in nowadays sense, it's not just a building, it's a whole castle. It's on the top of the mountain. Now, unfortunately, it's in ruins. It's a big area, very, very large area. Because in the past, when they had churches, headquarters, etc., there were so many cultivating lands also within that property.
And you had asked about the Istanbul
Oh,
picture.
yeah, if there's any feedback from Armenians living in Turkey at this point.
Perhaps Dr. Simonian could answer that question and give feedback from the study.
I think at this stage, it's very difficult for the Istanbul Patriarchate to say anything. We have not officially heard anything from them, but definitely His Holiness Aram has informed them that he is proceeding with this case.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Tolga Sweet Hürriyet. Just to clarify the relationship between Istanbul Armenian Patriarch and His Holiness the Second Aramean. They are not cooperating on this case as far as I understood, right? There is a coordination, but...
Yeah, correct, yeah. They are not coordinating, yeah.
They are
No.
not coordinating.
Yeah, no.
Is it legal to file this kind of case as a foreigner in Turkey to the Supreme Court directly?
Yeah, why not?
Did you sue, for example, the registration office when they denied to you the access for the titles?
Sorry, could you
Did
please
you
repeat?
sue the registration office when
Yes.
they denied you to access the
Yes,
register?
yes.
So you finalize all the domestic legal process before going to...
No, we couldn't. We did not finalize the domestic remedies because first of all, we could not access to the registration records. So we considered this unusual or useless to try the domestic remedies, domestic avenues, and we decided to file the case before the Constitutional Court.
Perhaps I can just clarify further to what my colleague has said. First of all, the Catholicate of Cilicia has a distinct legal personality which was recognized by the Ottoman Empire from the 19th century onwards. So there is a distinct legal personality, and that is why there's no coordination with the Patriarchate in Istanbul, because this particular property clearly falls within the historical jurisdiction of the Holy See of Cilicia. And the Ottoman archives have plenty of evidence to that effect. And the second question about the exhaustion of domestic remedies, which you asked, I believe what my colleague is trying to say is that there is no requirement before the European Court of Human Rights to exhaust remedies that are ineffective. And as I said, we have been met with the obstacle that there's a circular denying access even to the land registry. And since we are challenging the validity of the Turkish abandoned property laws, we've gone directly to the Turkish Constitutional Court, which is the only court that is able to address the constitutional validity or the validity under international law of those provisions.
So after this process, the case will be able to go to the European Justice Court, probably, right?
Yes.
Because
European Court of Human Rights.
European Court of Human Rights, yes. And another question for Mr. Amparian. So I saw an article on New York Times recently that this kind of cases will be ramped up. As far as we know, that after Centennial, the 24th statement, April 24th statement from the president was frustrating for the Armenian, the American diaspora here. But as far as I understand, the agenda of ANCA and other diaspora organizations will be this kind of cases. As I read on the paper. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? You're going to witness this kind of cases more?
I mean, this initiative is the initiative of the Catholicos, and we support it. We think it's a strong case, and it'll be judged on its merits, not as part of a broader effort. So I do anticipate that you'll see others, but each will be a legal case, making a claim. In this case, it's hard to refute the argument that a church that functioned as a church for 1,000+ years and was only denied to the Armenians through an act of genocide. I mean, I'd love to hear the defense for why that church should not be in Armenian hands, and why I, for example, shouldn't be able to take a trip to that city and pray in that church. I don't know what I look forward to hearing that argument against that. But each case will be judged on its merits. We support the work of the Catholicos. I think more broadly, you will see a focus on justice, and it's unfortunate this April that President Obama chose to miss the opportunity to join this movement, but the movement's going forward.
Just to clarify, why are you organizing this press briefing in Washington?
I think that we have seen a greater focus here in Washington, in Congress, by the administration, by civil society. I think the outrage over the atrocities being committed today against Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East, I think all combined, right? If you add to that the Centennial, there's just a growing focus here in Washington, one of the major capitals of the world, on the rights of Christian minorities, the rights of religious minorities, the atrocities that are being committed against these communities. So we thought this was a good place and a good time to raise this issue publicly here in Washington. Of course, the case is being filed in Turkey. It will be judged by the court in Turkey and ultimately by the European Court.
I believe Dr. Simonian would also.
Well, I would like to mention that this is not the only press conference that we will be holding. Our lawyer has already had one in Turkey, and we are soon going to have another one in Geneva, because, as you know, the churches and citizens of Switzerland had been very supportive of our history, of our suffering from the first day, and even the president of Switzerland in 1923 spoke to the League of Nations, describing what had happened to us. So we have a series of commemoration there, and in relation to that commemoration, we're also going to have a press conference.
Hi, could you provide a little insight into
Could you please introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, my name's Robin Barone. I live down the street from Philadelphia. Could you provide insight into the Turkish legal process? And I mean, I'm American, so I don't understand the process in terms of timing, appeals, how long this may or may not take. That's the first part. And the second part, do you have any insight if this can affect the Turkish application to the EU, or just be a part of kind of discouraging that application?
Well, I think the most difficult question for me, I don't know how long does it take, but in my opinion, it will take to finalize the final decision. I don't think that we will get between 3 months and 6 months from now on. And second question, your second question, I don't see any relation between being membership of EU and chairman of the EU law in the Bar Association of Istanbul, and I have a master's degree in EU law, and there isn't any relation.
You mentioned it was a human rights issue, and my understanding from living in Europe that the human
Yeah,
rights
but it's
aspect isn't
it
why-
could be okay. A human rights issue, of course, it's a first protocol, the article first of the first protocol. Yeah, okay, then will be discussed before the Court of Human Rights. It's a legal case, so I don't see any relation, political relation at least. It doesn't affect the being membership of the EU, the access of Turkey in EU, in my opinion.
Also,
Doesn't have
it's
it.
also, you also mentioned it's a property right issue, and that's, the European countries do, their legal system guarantees property rights and other stuff, protections and title enforcement.
Yeah, for example, in my submission, I mentioned as a sample, I mentioned to a Greek case. In Greece, the Greek government confiscated, it's called monastery case, the monastery case. So it's happening in Europe as well. Greek is a member of of this union, and it happens quite similar things in Greece as well. So I don't see any connection, anything to do with the accession of Turkey in EU.
And if I may just add, I think in all fairness, the record is that Turkey has not been unresponsive to the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, which is why this is a great opportunity to engage this very politicized issue within the framework of international law. And I don't think that there's any reason to believe that an adverse ruling by the European Court of Human Rights would not be respected by Turkey.
Yeah,
So-
recently, Turkey, 3 years ago, if I'm not 3 or 4 years ago, maybe you know the orphanage building case of the Greek Patriarchate. You know, Turkey lost this case before the Court of Human Rights, and I in Turkey filed a retrial case, which was the first property case, retrial, trying to claiming back the property, to return back the property to Turkey, to the Greek Patriarch, and Turkey accepted the case. So in this respect, I'm very hopeful and optimistic.
Any further questions? This gentleman in the back. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had your hand up.
No, just, okay, go ahead.
Please.
My first question is, I guess,
Just introduce yourself.
Sarkis Balakhyan from Human Rights Watch. I guess my first question is, what are the probabilities that the Turkish Constitutional Court would actually rule in favor of Armenians, or Armenia, or the Patriarch, the Catholicos? And then my second question is, considering the fact that we don't have a concrete idea of how large or how big this property is, what were kind of the legal elements that were presented to the Turkish court when you don't have an idea as to what you're claiming or how large the property that you're claiming?
I start with your second question. Therefore, I asked the Constitution the Constitutional Court to measure how big this land is, because we couldn't do it. So we claimed on behalf of my client from the Constitutional Court to appoint experts to do that. I cannot do it. I'm not an expert. And your first question.
Probability.
Probability. Well, I believe that the constitutional, the members of the Constitutional Court will not consider, this property was belonging to the Armenians, and now the claimant is an Armenian church. So let's refuse this case. No, they won't do that. If it could be another legal reason, a legal excuse for rejecting the case, but not this excuse. This could not be an excuse, I believe.
If I may just add to what my colleague has said, even though we don't have access to the cadastre maps, I think the property itself is quite distinct. There are walls of the monastery, which is situated on top of a hill. It's a very distinct property. So it's pretty clear where it begins and ends. And I wanted to add also that although the Constitutional Court of Turkey is a very respectable body with a great body of jurisprudence, certainly a court that can be taken quite seriously. I think the wisest course of action for the Turkish government would be to voluntarily return the property, or to risk a precedent in the European Court of Human Rights that could create far greater problems for the government down the road. And this would be a great opportunity, once again, to open a space for dialogue and reconciliation.
I also would like to add something to your question. By chance, I obtained the pictures of the cadastre plans. I attached to our submission as an evidence, and on these plans, on these pictures, you can see the name of the street, Monastery Street. So, in fact, Turkish authorities accept that there is a monastery. Or there was, because you can also still you can see the ruins. It exists there. So, in my opinion, it's not easy to deny this fact. I mentioned it in my submission. If you go there, you will see.
I'll go. And one more question to the Archbishop. I mean, let's assume that the Turkish Constitutional Court, or if it doesn't happen in the Turkish Constitutional Court, then the European Court actually rules in favor of the Catholicos and the property is returned. Are there plans to, I mean, as far as I've understood, it's in ruins, so is there a plan to kind of reconstruct a church or a place of worship?
We cannot
there?
put the cart before the horse, you know.
If I may just note that there is a very interesting precedent, of course, in Diyarbakir, where the municipality had the wisdom and vision to voluntarily return a property that was restored, and where commemorations were held on the centenary. And certainly there's no reason why the same couldn't be done with the monastery and cathedral of St. Sophia. And perhaps Dr. Simonian can say something as well, but my understanding is that His Holiness Arm I has indicated that certainly the intention is not simply to inherit the ruins, but to bring back the presence of the church in Kozan.
Well, I think all I can do is confirm what you said. Plans, the hope is there, the plan is there, and hopefully we'll get there.
Any other questions? Well, if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank all of you for being present today, and to thank also Your Eminence and all the dear colleagues for participating. And I hope the next press conference that we have is to celebrate the return of this property, and we can have the same press conference in Kozan in celebration. Inshallah. Thank you very much.